Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
Actually, this afternoon, Alex will give a talk about message passing. Actually, I'm quite proud to invite Alex to give a talk. Alex currently is a second-year PhD student in Berkeley. His advisor is Peter Bartlett. Before he got his bachelor degree in IT in computer science. Hi.
Thanks for the introduction, Vinny. Today I'll be talking about proximal methods and rounding schemes for optimization in certain graph structured optimization problems. And this is joint work with Pradeep Ravikumar and Martin Wainwright at UC Berkeley. So in this work, we're concerned with solving some optimization problems that arise in Markov random fields. So let me quickly introduce or recap what Markov random fields are to you. So a Markov random field is basically a representation for a probability distribution on a collection of random variables. So we have random variables, let's say x1 through xp, and we assume that these are discrete random variables. So each of them takes values in 1 through m. And we have a probability distribution over these random variables that is that is characterized by the structure of a graph, which is the Markov random field. And the probability distribution is parameterized by two sets of parameters. The local parameters are the node potentials, which give you the local information about the node's affinity to take on particular values. And we have the edge potentials, which describe the nature of pairwise interaction between pairs of random variables. So for instance, if two variables are positively correlated, you expect the edge potential to be to have a high positive value and to have a high negative value if they're negatively correlated, and so on. And by theory of MRFs, the sort of independence relations in under these distributions are characterized by connectivity in the connectivity property in the graph. So the problem that we are interested in solving is the problem of finding the map labeling for these sets of random variables, which is the yes.
Does your method apply to beyond pairwise?
Well, the thing is that you can, in general, represent any arbitrary potential as a pairwise potential by certain methods that have already been proposed in previous literature. So I did not explicitly consider a form beyond a pairwise form, because you can there is sort of a black box reduction that you can do to convert it into a pairwise potential always by basically forming something like supernodes. So we are interested in finding this map labeling, which is basically the mode of this distribution, the labeling that has the highest probability under this model. And it's quite obvious that it is the labeling that will maximize over all possible labelings of maximize this linear objective inside the exponential function. So clearly, because we have these discrete values only, this is sort of an integer linear program, the problem of finding this map labeling, and hence it is known to be NP hard, and there are lots of hardness results on problems of this kind. So this problem arises a lot, and there's been a lot of previous work on this problem, starting from the classical sort of max product algorithm, which is a dynamic programming algorithm that is known to be exact on trees and is basically an extension of Viterbi algorithms from HMMs. One field in which this problem arises a lot is that of computer vision, where people try to use the map labelings to, for instance, do image segmentation and a variety of other problems. So some very nice literature on this problem came out of the vision community. In particular, they showed that for certain kinds of potentials, you can use the technique of graph cuts to find the map labeling. And there is a very nice survey in the work of Boykov et al. Probably the state-of-the-art algorithm for this problem is the tree-weighted max product algorithm, which was proposed initially by Wainwright et al., further studied by Kolmogorov and co-authors, and recently Globerson and Yakola proposed a globally convex and convergent version of this algorithm by using the idea of oriented hypertrees. There have been a lot of convex free energy approximations which are also related to the work that we'll be discussing in the next few slides, and these were proposed by Yair Weiss and co-authors. A lot of convex relaxations of this integer linear program to things like linear programs, quadratic programs, second order cone programs, SDPs, etc. have been studied in a lot of detail, and some of the more recent work is related to Lagrangian relaxation and simulated annealing, also very related to our work, and the idea of using basically subgradient method after doing some kind of a dual decomposition, which is one of the only convergent and exact methods to solve a relaxed version of the problem that I'll be describing in the next slide. So what's the basic idea? Well, we have an integer linear program. We do what people always do, which is to form a linear programming relaxation, and we do this by observing that even though we are optimizing over discrete values of discrete valued variables, which can be seen as optimizing basically over a bunch of indicator variables, we can always relax the 0, 1 indicator variables to their expected values, and this does not change the optimum of the linear program. So we can always replace the indicator variables with their expectations, which are the node marginal probabilities mu s's and edge marginal probabilities mu st's. Now of course, because these marginal probabilities are coming out of a single consistent distribution, they cannot be completely arbitrary. They will be related in some ways. There will be some constraints that will be relating these mu s's and mu st's. However, note that if we can enumerate those constraints and optimize over those constraints this a linear objective in these mu's, then we can hope to solve this relaxed problem efficiently and get the optimum of the map labeling. Well, since the original problem was NP-hard, something has to go wrong, and the thing that goes wrong is that the number of constraints that characterize these distributions is exponentially large in the number of optimization variables. So you cannot even enumerate all the constraints in polynomial time, leave alone optimizing over them. So the trick people use is to take a subset of these constraints that is tractable, that can be easily optimized over. So some of the natural constraints are, of course, these are probabilities, they should be non-negative. The probability of a node taking a particular label should add up to 1 when you sum over all labels, so that's the normalization constraint. In addition, the edge marginal probability should be consistent with the node marginal probabilities, which means that if you sum out over all the possible labels of one node, then you should get the node marginal probability of the other node, and that is the marginalization constraint mentioned here. And the set of normalization and marginalization constraints taken together is often referred to as the local polytope, because it's just looking at sort of first order local constraints and not looking at higher order structures in the graph. So the first order linear programming relaxation best known in literature is this maximization problem with non-negativity constraints and over the local polytope of inner product between the potential between the parameter vector theta and the marginal probability vector mu, and this LP relaxation is what we aim to solve. So but before we even go about doing that, well, it's clear that this is a linear program now, and we can just use any off-the-shelf LP solving procedure to solve it. So what's the big deal? Why do we need a new method? The problem is that these the classical methods turn out to be too expensive and too slow for the typical problem sizes that are often encountered in applications of this problem. So for instance, I mentioned computer vision. There often the number of labels is as big as 256, and the number of variables is the number of pixels in your picture. So it's a pretty huge number, and the total number of optimization variables that you have is the number of edges in the graph times the number of labels squared, and if your method scales badly in the number of variables, then you can forget using the method on this problem. So that's one issue. The second is that these methods are often the classical methods are not easy to implement in a parallelized or distributed fashion, which again is a big concern on large problem sizes. And both these issues are arising because of the fact that we are trying to use something generic which does not leverage the particular structure. The optimization problem coming out of sort of an underlying graphical structure has some very nice properties, and we need to leverage these properties if we want to come up with an efficient method to solve these linear programs. Let me remark that tree-weighted max product that I referred to earlier does address a lot of these concerns because it solves a particular dual instance of the LP relaxation that I just mentioned. However, tree-weighted max product is specifically tailored to the constraints of the local polytope. Now, it's known that since the number of constraints is exponentially large, often people also want to work with higher order constraints known as cycle inequalities and so on and so forth. And modifying tree-weighted max product to handle new constraints is a very challenging job. People have tried it in the past, and it gets very messy very soon. So essentially, we want to come up with a LP solving procedure that can provide us an exact solution to the LP relaxation in a time complexity competitive with algorithms like max product and tree-weighted max product, which should be easy to implement in a parallelized and distributed fashion, and which provides us the capability of seamlessly incorporating new constraints into our relaxation if we wish to. So in order to do this, we need to borrow some techniques from optimization theory. And the first concept that comes in handy is that of Bregman divergences, which can be defined for most strictly convex functions f. And the Bregman divergence defined under a function f between 2 points mu and nu is basically the gap between the function f evaluated at mu. Sorry, these q and p should have been they should have been nu and mu, but yeah. So you take the point mu and you evaluate the function at that point. Then you take your reference point nu and you take the Taylor approximation to the function at the point nu, and you evaluate the gap between this Taylor approximation. Now, by convexity of f, this gap is always going to be non-negative, and if it's strictly convex, it's going to be strictly non-negative. As the function is more and more curved, this gap will be larger and larger. And the reason it's called a divergence is because it has certain similarities to the notion of distances that we are used to, which I will remark in a minute. But let's first see some examples of Bregman divergences. So the first and sort of the most classical example is when the Bregman function f is just the Euclidean norm squared. So I will be dealing with Bregman divergences defined over vectors. So the functions that I will define will always be functions of vectors. So the first example is the Euclidean norm squared of a vector. And in this case, the Bregman divergence is just the Euclidean distance between two vectors. So that's kind of nice. It tells us that these divergences definitely incorporate the standard notion of distance that we are used to. Another extremely classical example is that using negative entropy. Now, of course, in this case, I have probability distributions on nodes and edges. So what I do is I define the negative Shannon entropy on each node marginal distribution and each edge marginal distribution, and then just take a weighted linear combination of these individual node and edge entropies, which is also a convex function by the convexity of individual functions. And then, not surprisingly, the Bregman divergence turns out to be the weighted sum of the KL divergences of the node and the edge marginal distributions. So this is again this is actually going to be one of the very useful Bregman divergences to us, as we will see in a minute. The third useful and an extremely non-standard Bregman function that I would be using, and in fact it's not a Bregman divergence in the strict sense, is what I call the tree-weighted divergence. Now this is an idea borrowed from the tree-weighted message passing literature. So you have a set of spanning trees on the graph, which means that you have a collection of trees, each tree contains all the vertices in your graph and some subset of edges. You define the notion of these edge appearance probabilities, rho STs, which is just the fraction of the trees that an edge appears in. So if you have two spanning trees, and if an edge appears in both of them, then you set rho ST to be 1, if an edge appears in just one of them, you set rho st to be 0.5. If it doesn't appear in any of them, then rho st will be 0. So that's the idea of these edge appearance probabilities. And using these edge appearance probabilities and these spanning trees, we basically define a tree-weighted entropy, which is basically the average of a bunch, the negative entropy of a bunch of probability distributions where each probability distribution is defined on one tree. So the idea is that once you have your node and edge marginal distributions, there is a well-known consistent way of defining a probability distribution over the subset of variables involved in the tree. So what you do is you just, and this sort of scary looking formula is actually a very standard probability distribution known in the literature for trees based on these marginal probabilities. And you just take this distribution, you compute its entropy. It again has a nice and simple form, which I will not mention here though. And then you just take the average of these entropies across the trees. So there is a corresponding Bregman divergence, which is not so nice to write out, so I'm not going to write it. But the reason why I mention this entropy function is because it's going to inspire a very nice algorithm which works remarkably well in practice. So just to mention quickly the properties of Bregman divergences that make them similar to distances, well, these are, as I mentioned, always non-negative, and they will be 0 if and only if the 2 points are identical. However, as was clear from the entropy example, these divergences do not enjoy properties like symmetry or triangle inequality.
Sorry. This Bregman divergence actually does depend on the set of spanning trees that you're choosing.
Yes, it does. So it's not exactly a Bregman divergence, and let me tell you why. Because this function is actually strictly convex only when the mu's come from the marginal polytope, from the local polytope that I described. If the mu's do not satisfy the constraints of the local polytope, this function is not even going to be convex. So it's convex on your constraint set, it's non-convex outside your constraint set, but just the convexity on the constraint set suffices for me to come up with the algorithms that I want. The next tool that we borrow from optimization literature is the idea of proximal minimization, which is sort of a regularization technique. So it says that I have some objective function objective function f that I'm interested in minimizing. But this function I don't like this function. It has some bad properties, and it's not very nice to optimize over directly. So I'm going to add a second component to my optimization problem. The second component in the proximal minimization literature is usually some kind of a generalized distance function. People call it the prox function. It's basically some kind of a distance function, and as you might guess, for us, it's going to be a Bregman divergence. So why is this nice? Well, it gives us a bunch of nice properties. First of all, adding this Bregman divergence just by the strict convexity of Bregman divergence makes our entire optimization problem strictly convex. So we know that the dual is going to be nicely behaved. There's going to be strong duality and everything. We can go and work in the dual if we want to. However, there are even better properties that we get as a result. So note that instead of solving just one problem of maximizing theta dot nu, I now set up a series of problems where mu n plus 1 is defined to be the minimizer of my linear objective function plus a weighting factor times Bregman divergence to the previous iterate, and I solve this series of subproblems now. However, let's assume for a moment that my sequence mu n is converging to a fixed point. Then of course this distance, this Bregman divergence will start shrinking to 0 because my iterates are getting closer and closer. Hence, the only possible fixed point of this sequence is going to be the optimizer of the first function f, the original function that I was intending to optimize. So what it tells me is that even without, so the idea of adding this second sort of strictly convex function is something that people have been using in simulated annealing, for instance, for a long time, and have tried to apply to this map optimization problem already, but were unable to prove theoretical guarantees about. What we gain here is that in simulated annealing, it's kind of essential that you send omega into infinity at a particular rate, which may or may not be needed in general for proximal minimization, because the Bregman divergence term is already shrinking by itself. So omega n can afford to be a little larger, and that kind of gives us an interesting degree of freedom when we apply the proximal minimization techniques to solve this problem. So since we have a Bregman divergence in our objective function, another concept that comes in very handy is the property of cyclic projections that Bregman projections enjoy. So since a Bregman divergence is a strictly convex function, we can define for any point, any reference point nu, we can define its Bregman projection onto a convex set, which is the point nu hat that is closest to nu. Should have been nu in the my mu's and nu's are all over the place today. The point nu in the convex set that is closest to nu in the sense of this Bregman divergence. Now the interesting property of cyclic projection tells us that suppose I have a complicated convex set that can be written down into as an intersection of bunch of simpler convex sets, and I want to, so for instance, let's say my simple convex sets are two lines, and I want to their intersection is of course this one point, which is not so complicated, but for purpose of example. So I start with a point P that I want to project onto this intersection. I do it by first projecting onto the first line, taking the projection, projecting onto the second line, and repeating this process until it can be provably shown that I'm going to converge to the intersection or to the projection of point P onto the intersection of these convex set CIs if I just repeat this process cyclically and the rates of convergence and everything is well studied.
What do you mean by cyclically? You have to reproject?
Right, so you just one round of doing this sequence will not suffice. You have to keep on doing this, and asymptotically you will go to the intersection, projection onto the intersection. So just to quickly recap, I started with the original map optimization problem, which I perturbed by adding a proximal function to it and setting up a sequence of problems. At this point I do a slight rewriting to absorb this linear term into the Bregman divergence itself, and this is done by taking the reference parameter mu n and modifying it to a mu tilde n. Now the reason why I do this is because now my original minimization, the proximal minimization problem has been cast as a Bregman projection problem. Okay. Now the rewriting involved in going from mu n to mu tilde n of course depends on the particular Bregman function being used. So just to give you some examples, for L2 distance the mu tilde n is set to mu n plus theta. For KL divergence it's set to mu n times exponential of theta, where addition and multiplication are element wise for vectors. The second thing we note is that we are optimizing over a polytope, which is of course just a bunch of linear intersection of a bunch of linear constraints. So we have to perform a Bregman projection over an intersection of linear constraints. If we can perform projections over just individual linear constraints efficiently, then cyclic projections tells us that we can just repeat this process cyclically, and we will eventually find the optimum over this entire local polytope. So that's kind of the key idea of our method. We have an optimization problem to solve over this local polytope. We start with some initial point mu0, and we perform the initialization step to go to mu tilde 1 that I just described. We then project mu tilde 1 onto the set by using Bregman projections, and we repeat this process several times, and eventually we converge to mu star, which is the optimum of our linear programming relaxation. So to give you a flavor of what these projections and what these updates look like, let's consider the special case where the Bregman function is the weighted entropy function. In fact, it's here I'm using uniform weights, so you can just think of sum of a bunch of entropies. So the initialization step is something that I just mentioned on an earlier slide. It's the same as that, and the interesting thing is that to solve, to project over normalization and marginalization constraint, you just need to iterate this set of messages over all the edges, and then you just need, for normalization, you just divide everything by sum of the probability over all the labels. So you just normalize by division in the usual way. But this is the only real operation that you need to perform over all edge. You need to do this sort of a message passing procedure at every step. So this is actually very similar to the belief propagation kind of methods that were being used already, but this is now a convergent version of those belief propagation methods. However, because it is so similar to the belief propagation methods, it does end up inheriting all the good properties of those methods, like because these updates are very local, you can implement these updates independently for all the edges. So you can distribute your updates, you can have them in a parallelized fashion, and you can perform similar algorithm under other divergences. There is only one case where the algorithm looks significantly different, and I'm going to point that one out as well, which is the case of the tree-related proximal solver. Now here the difference is that so remember here in the initialization step I was going from mu to sort of a mu tilde, right? So I was within this sort of probability domain. In the tree-related case, in my initialization step kind of leaves the probability domain. So I basically compute sort of a set of parameters at every round, theta n's, theta ns, and theta nsts, which are set basically in some strange way, depending on the gradients of my Bregman function and so on. And one way to think of it is you have kind of taken the log of these updates roughly. So the theta here is sort of like log of the mu here, but you just compute some set of these thetas according to a fixed deterministic rule. The interesting thing that happens is that you can then show that the problem of the Bregman projection problem that you need to solve can be actually cast as a standard problem that tree-weighted sum product algorithm solves. So tree-weighted has a sum product version and a message passing version, and you can show that the inner loop performing the Bregman projection is just requires you to be able to solve the tree-weighted sum product problem, which there are plenty of very efficient solvers available for, developed by Wainwright and Kolmogorov and later work by a lot of other people. So the idea of using tree-weighted sum product solvers as the inner workhorse for our method is a very attractive one, because they can potentially be a lot more efficient than doing cyclic projections. Now at this point it seems we have basically a method that can give us exact solution to LP relaxations, which have distributable and parallelizable updates. Let me remark that tree-weighted sum product algorithms again are very similar to belief propagation, so they also have this property. And additionally our methods have ease of incorporating new constraints, because at least in the cases where we are doing cyclic projections, projecting onto a new constraint requires you to compute the projection onto an individual constraint only, which usually is not that hard to do. The only thing not clear at this point is what the time complexity of our methods is going to look like, and these methods have sort of this double loop structure, which is often considered as sort of the big taboo in a lot of these optimization problems. However, and indeed if we have to sort of sit around and wait for numerical convergence of our methods, we can actually take quite a while to converge. However, the second trick that we use is to come up with some very nice rounding schemes that allow us to actually converge really fast when our LP relaxation is tight. When the relaxation is exact and has an integral solution, then we can come up with certain rounding schemes that give us very nice convergence properties. So what's the idea with rounding schemes? Well, the idea is that we are trying to solve an integer linear program here anyways. So if at some point while solving my linear program I can take the set of probabilities that I have, extract an integral solution out of them, and give you a certificate of optimality, tell you that this integral configuration is actually the map labeling, then the problem is solved. I don't need to optimize any further and wait for numerical convergence of my LP solving procedure. And this is exactly what the rounding schemes aim to do. So what might these schemes look like? Well, the simplest thing is to maybe just take the highest probability label for every node according to my node marginals. Doesn't work. There are plenty of examples in the literature where such a rounding scheme would fail. Okay, we can't work with nodes, so let's try and work with edges. So we define certain local quantities on every edge. Exact nature is not important, just something based on node and edge marginals. So we are not, the important thing to note is that the local quantity is just based on that edge and its corresponding nodes. And for every local quantity, we find the label pair that maximizes it. Now, of course, a lot of edges are going to share nodes, and both these edges are going to want to assign some label to this common node. Now, if this label turns out to be the same from both the edges, we say that, and this happens across all edges, then we say that we have found a consistent labeling through the edge rounding method. However, it can always happen that there are two edges that do not agree over the label they assign to their shared node, and in that case we just declare failure and we continue optimizing further. Just means that our marginals are not yet good enough for the rounding scheme to work. Don't need to restrict ourselves to edges. We can go to higher order neighborhoods like stars, which is a node and all its neighbors. Trees, again, all these neighborhoods like stars, trees, they're very easy to optimize over, because just things like max product are going to work. Just 2 rounds of dynamic programming algorithm suffice to find the highest probability labeling over such simple structures. So we can find these labelings very efficiently, and again we check for consistency over the shared nodes. So while the naive rounding scheme does not enjoy any guarantees in general, what we can show is that at any iteration, if any of the edge, star, or tree rounding schemes finds a consistent configuration, then that configuration is indeed the map labeling for the set of random variables. And this theorem basically relies on certain invariants that our algorithms maintain across the updates. So based on that invariant, we can show that if at any point we have reached an agreement using this rounding method, then it is going to be globally optimum. And empirically, it usually for at least sort of the regimes where I have tested, it takes roughly, so if TRW max product takes you X amounts of time, then these rounding schemes will give you a solution in not more than 8x or 10x of time, which is not bad given the fact that TRW does not give you a guarantee that it's going to be solving the LP relaxation exactly, while we give you a guarantee that we'll be solving the LP relaxation exactly. But of course, you can hope this only when the LP relaxation is tight. Otherwise, you cannot hope to get a convergence through rounding. So just to remark about rates of convergence, for proximal rounding schemes, superlinear rates of convergence are well known, but they assume that the inner subproblem, the Bregman projection problem in our case, is exactly solved. Now, of course, we use cyclic projections, which is only asymptotically going to give us the solution to the inner subproblem. So we have an inexact solution to the Bregman projection problem. But people in proximal minimization theory were nice enough to analyze that case for us as well, and we know that at least a linear rate of convergence will be guaranteed even when the inner solutions are inexact. However, the really interesting case is that what we can show is if the LP relaxation is tight, then you actually have a finite convergence, no asymptotics. You can prove a bound on the number of iterations before one of the rounding schemes is going to succeed. And that's again a very nice property of these methods. So that's great, but all that works when the LP relaxation is tight. Now, of course, when the LP relaxation is not tight, you still want to be able to extract a good solution from whatever probability vector you're stuck with now. So in particular, the deterministic rounding schemes don't tell you what to do when you have a conflict over a node or an edge or something. So we want to have a rounding scheme that will give you sort of a principled prescription for what to do, something hopefully better than just arbitrary tie breaking when there are conflicts. So we come up with some randomized rounding schemes which work regardless of whether the LP relaxation is exact or inexact, so they work in all cases. They can be easily de-randomized for efficient implementation. It can be shown that for the case of integral LPs, the randomized version finds the correct solution with high probability. The de-randomized version again will have an iteration bound that will give you a finite convergence for integral LPs again. The really neat part with these randomized rounding methods is that they were not designed to specifically work with our method. So while the deterministic rounding schemes rely on certain invariants that my algorithm maintains, the randomized rounding scheme only relies on the fact that it has access to some LP solver that has a linear rate of convergence to its optimum. And as long as you have that linear rate of convergence, this de-randomized version is going to enjoy a finite convergence, and the randomized version will converge with high probability. So these randomized rounding schemes have also an appeal in the fact that they can be applied to even other LP solving procedures. So what's the idea with, damn it ate up one of the edges. It was there in my computer yesterday, I promise. So the idea with randomized rounding scheme is that you have a graph with a vertex set and edge set. Now you take a subset of the edges and chop them off from the graph. So, well, imagine a black line here, by the way. This is a complete grid. And imagine I chop off all the blue edges. Then I'm left with a bunch of trees, not an arbitrary bunch of trees, but a vertex disjoint bunch of trees. So these trees do not share any vertex, and that's what we call a forest. So we find an edge set E such that after disconnecting those edges, we are left with a forest. Now, as before, I go back to this way of defining probability distributions over trees based on marginal probabilities. And for each subtree Ti, I define this probability distribution, and I just sample a labeling for the nodes involved in that tree based on this probability distribution. Now you might ask me, is this sampling, how efficient is this, and all that, but I'm just going to give you a de-randomized version if you ask me that question. So it's not even important. What is important is that these trees, because they are vertex disjoint, there are no conflicts now. You can just concatenate the labels for each of these subsets, and you have a consistent labeling for the entire graph, and you're going to have all the properties that I just mentioned on the previous slides. So much for the theoretical convergence rates. Let's see how this works in practice. And I was not interested in trying out any huge problems or anything. I just wanted small proof of concept implementation of this. So I tried on small grid graphs with 100 to 900 nodes, 5 node labels, sort of the standard mixed Potts potential with varying signal to noise ratio, which is just the ratio of the strength of node potentials to edge potentials. So a low SNR is a hard problem here. We wanted to verify the rates of convergence that we just proposed, and we wanted to judge the performance of our rounding schemes. So the first thing was to verify the rate of convergence. We took the log of the distance of the marginal probability vector to the fixed point mu star, which by optimality of our methods is also the LP optimum. We took the log of distance to that point, plotted it against number of iterations. On the log plot, you see that there is a superlinear rate of convergence. It would have been a straight line if the rate of convergence were linear. So okay, that theorem was correct. Hopefully that means, because these are converging well. The interesting thing is that these curves do not differ that much based on problem sizes, so that sort of bodes well for the scalability of method. And let me remark that this plot was done using entropy proximal solver. Tree-weighted proximal solver gives similar and even better convergence in a lot of cases, and scales even better with respect to problem sizes because of the inherent scalability properties of tree-weighted sum product algorithms, and also the people who developed this write much better code than I do. For the convergence of the rounded solution, we just for the edge-based rounding scheme, we plotted the number of edges in the graph where conflicts were found during rounding, and how this evolved with number of iterations. And again, we see, like, in very few number of iterations, these conflicts have pretty much vanished, which means we get to the LP optimum by rounding really fast. And again, let me remark that the other rounding schemes, the tree-based rounding scheme, for instance, works even better in a lot of cases because it's looking over larger neighborhoods, and it often converges even faster than the edge-based rounding scheme, and the randomized rounding schemes or their de-randomized versions also have a very similar behavior. And again, with respect to problem sizes, we have a pretty good scaling here. Finally, we also looked at the energy of the rounded solution, because that tells you that, well, it could be the case that the rounding scheme hasn't declared a convergence, but it has already obtained the right solution. So if the energy of the integral solution stops changing, you know that it did recover the rounded solution well before it was able to give you a certificate of optimality, and that sort of does happen to some extent. Again, the energy of the rounded solution gets close to the best possible energy it's gonna get really, really fast. So again, just sort of a proof that these rounding schemes do work well in practice. So to sum up, we have proposed some new map estimation algorithms here that use the very nice framework of proximal minimization, and the use of graph structured Bregman divergences allow us to exploit the particular problem structure at hand, and we solve these in some cases by using cyclic Bregman projections, in other cases by using tree-related solvers, but all the methods that exploit the structure of the local polytope basically to a large extent. We come up with simple message passing updates that have a guarantee of convergence to the local optimum, to the LP optimum. And let me remark, this is kind of a very, very nice departure in this area. Most of the algorithms known are just algorithms. They don't come with any certificates of optimality. They're just shown to work well in practice. So this kind of the only sort of exception is probably the subgradient method, which by virtue of being an exact optimization method works, but works horribly slow in practice from my experience. And finally, we come up with a bunch of rounding schemes that allow really, really fast solutions for integral LPs, and also extend beyond our methods when we look at the randomized rounding schemes. So that's all I had to say, and thanks a lot for listening to my talk.
Question is the cyclic Bregman projection. Can I view it as some sort of coordinate descent scheme?
Yes, it is actually very closely related to. So it is related to doing coordinate descent in the dual, I think, if I remember correctly. That is one interpretation that has been shown for it.
It's about the rounding scheme. It seems to bear some similarity with my cutting plane. So, is there any connection with them? So sort of like you look at what constraint is violated, and then you brought that constraint to consider.
Right. But I don't really think that it is connected to cutting plane in any way, because it's not that we are, based on what happens in the rounding scheme, we are going to solve a different problem. We always solve the same problem, and rounding scheme is just a convergence sort of a convergence test that you make basically. Rounding schemes, at least the deterministic ones, really what you should think of them as some kind of they basically take some kind of a reparameterization view of our algorithms, which is sort of which has been popularized a lot by these tree-related message passing algorithms. And again, here we can show there is some kind of a reparameterization going on, and that's what allows you to do these rounding schemes.
So another question. So the reason, just to make sure I understand, the reason why you do this cyclic Bregman divergence projections because in every round you want to do some kind of a local
Yes.
thing. But of course, in principle, you could project onto a subset of the subset C's of the intersection of these subset C's that are involved, right? And in principle, this kind of a cyclic scheme would converge even faster, right?
Yes, so you can lift it to higher order neighborhoods that if you like. So in fact you can, yes, you can certainly, so for instance, instead of taking just an edge and a node, you can start taking something like star-shaped neighborhoods. You can show that you can actually perform projections in closed form even onto bigger neighborhoods, and that's not so bad. And actually the way you implement these projections is kind of it changes the efficiency of the implementation a lot.
But it doesn't work to go to this kind of a more sophisticated projection because you're gaining something in terms of convergence speed, but you're losing something in terms of making a projection, right?
Well, right. So if you as long as you're picking neighborhoods that are small enough that in your sort of parallelized implementation it's going to reside on one machine maybe or something, then yeah, it's for instance in a lot of these image problems your graph is a grid. So if you select your neighborhood well, then you can make sure that most of the things are still staying on the same machine, and then you can hopefully project onto bigger neighborhoods and not lose too much in efficiency, and certainly going to speed things up.